Hello and welcome back to another Warlords of Draenor dungeon preview. This time we're going to be taking a look at the Iron Docks, and I've got to say this is a really fun instance. I'm not particularly sure why, but there's something about it which just feels a little bit just nice and open. I've got to say it's great. Anyway, so it's located in Gorgrond, and we are sent there to destroy some Iron Horde boat that's meant to be attacking Shatrath City. Now, the dungeon itself does have a linear flow as we basically work our way from the entrance around the dock, then finally make our way onto the boat and defeat the boss, which is on the boat. Visually, it looks fantastic, I've got to say, and overall, it's just a ton of fun. So let's first talk about the boss 1 trash. Now, this trash is actually just pretty regular. There's nothing special going on. If I'm honest, it's situated in a very open location though, and that actually gives your tank a little bit of freedom in terms of what they pull. But overall, it's just simple enough regular trash. Now then, let's move on to the first boss. And while this boss is not particularly hard, I did find it to be a really rather enjoyable encounter. Now, do bear in mind that this is a level 92 dungeon on normal difficulty, so it's not going to be crazy hard. So what this boss does is that he starts off on a wolf. Now, this wolf has got a few simple abilities. First of all, he will lunge forward, doing damage to those in his path. Then he will also leap to somebody and then start mauling them, which will decrease their move speed and deal some damage. And then finally he does a roar that heals all of his allies. That's really all fine because this guy dies basically so quickly that none of this is really even a problem. Now, while all of this is going on, you're actually going to be dealing with some AoE stuff. There are these archers which fire down raining fire arrow thingy-majiggies on you. That's not particularly good, and they leave an AoE on the ground, so you really do need to be on your toes. They deal a decent amount of damage, so you don't want to stand with them. Now, once the wolf is down, the boss will also spawn some additional adds, which will fire even more fire arrows, so you really do want to nuke down those adds. Now, the boss himself will periodically... when I say the boss himself, I mean the orc dude once he's dismounted from his wolf. He will periodically call down a hail of barbed arrows. These actually hurt quite a lot, but you can avoid them. And then finally, there's a mechanic where the boss will be surrounded by a red shield, and if you attack while that shield is up, then the whole party will be feared, which obviously is not particularly good, especially if someone is feared into an AoE or something like that. Basically, whenever the boss brings a shield up, it's just a prime time to nuke down any adds that may be up. It's not a particularly hard fight, but it's certainly a fun fight. I enjoyed it. And it's a really good start to this instance. Now, overall, I think the boss is quite good. However, 1 or 2 more seconds warning on the shield would be nice in normal mode. And once again, in terms of the number tuning, I think that everything's actually pretty good. I definitely felt like I would be punished if I stood in the crap, and that's absolutely something that should be the case. So with the first boss dead, let's move on to the second boss's trash. Now, this trash is initially quite simple, but it's also really fun. So there are these iron stars that are lying around, and you can basically roll them down this big open area, and you get to aim them, and of course anything that they hit will be killed, which is really nice. I like it when Blizzard let us do little things like that. I know that it was sort of ripe for people being trolls, but I really thought that the strafing run that you did in Grim Batol was a really cool mechanic, so it's nice that we've got some just little things like that put back for this trash. Now, after you deal with those iron stars, what you end up doing is having to advance through this cargo area while avoiding volleys of rockets that come from the ship that you're trying to reach. Now, you avoid the volleys of rockets by standing behind the cargo. Basically, what you end up doing is just running behind the cargo, pulling all the trash, and then moving onwards. It's a nice enough idea, but it can cause an unfortunate amount of wipes, as if you get caught in the barrage of rockets, you really will get murdered. There are also these traps you can pull the larger Ogron adds into, and if you pull them into those traps, then they'll start to take, I think, 100% additional damage, which is pretty cool. So now that the boss 2 trash is dealt with, let's move on to the second boss himself. Now, this boss is sort of cool, but it could do with some more mechanics in my opinion. It's a council fight with no shared health pool, and you will face a warrior, an engineer, and a shaman. The warrior will do a large AoE slash thingy, and then he will also conjure up waves of lava with his sword. Next, there's the engineer. Now, what she will do is she will try to surround you with traps and then send a bomb after you. Of course, if you run into those traps, then the bomb will just hit you, and that's a bad thing. So what you want to do is get away from the ring of traps that you will place around you, while ensuring that you don't run into the bomb. It's pretty simple. Then she will also do a chain lightning with her malfunctioning jumper cables, so just don't stand in the chain lightning. And speaking of chain lightning, we have the final the final boss. So this is like, I think it's a blood shaman or something like that according to the dungeon journal, but what she does is she puts a dot on people, which obviously is not particularly nice for you, but then she also will put an absorb shield up on one of the other ads. Now, if you break this absorb shield by damaging it, then the other bosses will be healed up, so what you want to do is just let the absorb shield's duration run out, and, you know, just switch targets to something else, so that you don't lose uptime. Overall, it is a decent fight, but once the first mob is dead, it just gets super trivial. I think that what should probably happen is that the other mob should enrage when one of their friends dies, so that a level of challenge can be maintained throughout the encounter. Still though, it's fundamentally a decent bit of fun, so hopefully on the heroic mode, they'll add in a few more encounters and just up the numbers tuning so that it is decently hard. Alright then, so in between this boss and the next boss, we got some trash. Honestly, the trash isn't particularly special. There's some clef tubes, and I think they do a charge, which you don't want to stand in, but apart from that, that's really about it. Now then, let's move on to the third boss, and I've got to say that this guy was a little bit disappointing to me. It just felt rather tank and spank. So his scary ability is one that involves grabbing someone, then jumping away and trying to nibble on them so that he can heal himself. This is interruptible, and it just wasn't really much of a problem. I'll talk about why that's the case in a bit, though. His other ability is an AoE shout, which actually does a decent amount of damage. I think it was like 50k. It felt a little bit like Nazgrim's war song. It's unavoidable, and it's just something that the healer is going to have to deal with. Then he will also do a 10-yard AoE in which he just spins around quickly and rends people, so you don't want to stand in that. Then finally he does a mechanic where he basically just charges at a player and then he deals damage to anyone that he hits on the way, so of course you don't want to be hit by that. Now, this actually does sound like a really cool encounter based on the abilities, but in reality there just is not much thought to it. The difficulty on just about everything here could be a little bit higher, maybe with the exception of the AoE shout that he does. And I think that, especially considering how easy this was when I was in a pug that was scaled down to item level 520. Of course, 520 is significantly lower than the item level that most people will actually be dealing with this encounter on, so I'd say they could make it just a little bit harder. And this is definitely mirroring the feedback that I've heard from other players on the beta forums in regards to this boss. Okay then, so let's move on to the final boss of this encounter. Now, there is no trash on the way to this boss. You just basically kill the third boss and move right on to the fourth one. I kind of like it when they do that. It breaks up the pace a little bit. Now, the final boss of this dungeon is fantastic, in my opinion. Basically, you fight a Grahn and then two orcs. One of the orcs is a warrior, and then the other one will man a cannon. So, the way it just starts off is that you engage the Grahn, the tank tanks the Grahn, and then the warrior basically just jumps around the place and does his thing. Now, the warrior does not have much health, so he's actually very easy to deal with. You just nuke him down really quickly. He does a heroic leap, which will deal 20k damage to anyone who's near him when he lands. He also does an AoE slash, and then finally a blade storm. None of these abilities are super scary, and honestly, this guy will be dead for most of the fight. Now, while you're fighting, the orc with the cannon will be there, and he's actually going to be up for the majority of the fight. Basically, what he does is that he chooses a target and then starts shooting him. This will do a conal AoE that faces his current target, so if he selects you, you just want to run away from the group so that he's not AoEing everyone else. It really is pretty simple, but I guess it is nice that there was some sort of movement-based mechanic thrown in there to ensure that you always just have to sort of be on your toes. So I think that's definitely pretty great. Now, the other, main Ogron, or actually no, it's not an Ogron, it's just a flat-out Grahn. The Grahn doesn't actually do anything until the interim phase. He basically just whacks the tank. Now, the whole, mechanic about the Grahn is that he's got these two big cannons on him. So what happens is that there is an interim phase, and when he does this, he basically blasts everyone back to the start of the room, and then he starts firing volleys of rockets at everyone. Now, if you actually get hit by any of these volleys of rockets, you'll take 30k damage a second, and it will kill you quickly. So during these barrages, what you want to do is just stay behind the cover. Now, there's lots of cover in the room in the form of stacked up barrels and crates and things like that. So you start yourself off at the very back of the room, and you just work your way up to the boss by running between cover in between the volleys. And then once someone actually gets in melee range of the boss, he'll start, or stop even, firing the cannons, and it will just return to the regular fight. Once this interim phase is over, the back of the room explodes, so you can't just wait at the back while someone else does all the hard work for you. And that's really it. Basically, the flow of this fight is that you kill the Orc Warrior, then you deal with the first interim phase, then you fight the Grond till the second interim phase, and then I think after that the Orc will jump out of the cannon and you just kill him, which basically eliminates the whole cannon mechanic, and then you just rinse and repeat the interim phase until the boss is dead. It's an easy enough fight, but it really is quite fun. Now, while I do say it's easy, you do have to bear in mind that if you actually get hit by the barrage of missiles, you will get killed. Well, at least you'll probably get killed. So as long as you stay out of that, really, the other mechanics are pretty trivial, but overall it does make a really fun boss fight. I've got to say, I was really impressed by this instance. It's really well polished. The bosses are, for the most part, pretty fun, the trash is good, and as I said earlier, visually, it's just excellent. So overall, an extremely cool instance. So that's basically it for the video. Let me know what you thought of the dungeon, and specifically the bosses and their mechanics. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.